Hello and welcome back, everybody. For today's video, I'm reading into Leviticus. So, quick note, just a status update for my reading. The 90-day plan is going well. I think I'm on to day 8 now. So, I am finishing up Leviticus today, and I just finished the majority of my reading right now. And today's video, I am going to talk about a part of Leviticus, but the main point of today's video is after yesterday's video, Demati messaged me, so just a longtime Squirrel Nation member, and he was pointing out that the Old Testament like the rules and regulations that come in the Old Testament are not necessarily things you need to uphold anymore as a Christian, as a New Testament Jesus, like a believer in Jesus Christ. Which that part I had heard before, but an issue for me has always been, okay, if the Old Testament is all these rules and regulations that I no longer have to follow, then why do we even leave it in the Bible? And he gave a really great answer, and I'm going to simplify it, but his answer came down to reading through all the rules and the regulations is you can see the love that God has for people. And when he said that, it seemed simple, but I realized I was making an assumption. I actually had a very unfaithful viewpoint on the Bible, actually, and it was kind of hidden from my own sight, to be honest. And that was this: is my assumption was the Bible took human knowledge and it condensed it into something that it could share with society to benefit everybody, right? So a lot of Leviticus, and the parts that was hard to read, same thing with Genesis, the parts that started to get really dry and they were just describing things that to me as I take as common sense. For instance, on the screen right here, Leviticus chapter 15, verse 8. If the man spits on you, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. So there's a bunch of rules. I chose one that's like super common sense nowadays, right? Because we know if somebody spits on you, we have a concept of how diseases are spread, right? Like with the coronavirus stuff going around. I mean, if you ran into somebody, they sneeze on you, they cough on you, they spit on you, like these are common sense things. And I always assumed that the Bible took knowledge that already existed and it wrote it down. But then I realized actually that's not the case. Like I have no way of proving that. You could also assume, and I think this is my current stance, is imagine in a world where people didn't know these things. They didn't know how to cook the food. They didn't know how disease was transferred in different animals. And then imagine God is like, okay, these people are in trouble. This world has a lot of dangers, hidden dangers that they don't understand. So instead of like step by step explaining it, he gave very basic rules. And, it took me 2 days to read. And honestly, I could have read it in one day, no problem. But a lot of the stuff would have saved a lot of human life. Like and when I put myself in that mindset, it made the reading much more enjoyable. And like Demati was pointing out, like I felt God's love. I felt a parent caring about his children and giving them rules that help them survive and help them thrive. So this is one basic example because, I mean, some of the other examples were like, don't eat pork. Back then it made sense because pork if you don't thoroughly cook pork, there's a lot of diseases you can get. You can actually get worms in your brain that literally eat out chunks of your brain. Look it up on Google if you haven't. It is scary. So, these type of rules would really, really help back then. And a lot of the other rules, another part I was reading about was talking about like when people have rashes on their skin, and basically distinguishing between just maybe a brief allergic reaction and maybe leprosy or some other much more serious contagious thing and how to handle it. So if you assume that you were living in a world where none of this stuff was common knowledge, and then all of a sudden God spoke to Moses and Moses was able to pass this knowledge on to humanity, then you can like just imagine how many people were saved by this. And that does display God's love, like the depth of God's love. So thank you so much, Matt. That was a very I'm super appreciative that you took the time to write out that explanation you did, and it really helped me understand the Old Testament on a much more intimate level, and I feel God's presence in it so much more. So another, and the last point I want to make for today's video is there's a lot of rules now. If I'm reading through the Old Testament, there's a lot of rules that make sense. I can apply them to current knowledge. They make sense. So another example is after a man, okay, so this is Leviticus 15 still, and I could have chose, there's tons of rules and regulations. I just chose these because these were, I think, pretty easy ones to explain. Anyways, Leviticus chapter 15, verse 18, after a man and a woman have sexual intercourse, they must each bathe in water, and they will remain unclean until the next evening. Okay, once again, this makes sense if you think about a world where they're not understanding like sexually transmitted diseases, different things like this, right? It would make a lot of sense. Okay, after I have sex, definitely clean and just minimize the risk of contagion and then spreading it to somebody else, right? Another example is like menstrual cycle, right? So verse 24, if a man has sexual intercourse with her and her blood touches him, her menstrual impurity will be transmitted to him. He will remain unclean for 7 days, and any bed on which he lies will be unclean. So once again, if I read through this yesterday, I honestly would have interpreted this just like, old, I would not interpret it with love. But now when I read it, I'm like, yeah, if you think about the modern world with HIV and stuff, like this would have been very, very helpful, and a lot of other diseases, right? Your blood is blood-to-blood contact is like the easiest way to get any disease. So, yeah, this is just a very loving example. But the last point I want to make is a lot of these rules when I'm reading through the Old Testament make sense, but there's some that don't. Right? There's some that I don't know why this is the case. And here's an example, is verse 16, okay? Whenever a man has an emission of semen, he must bathe his entire body in water, and he will remain unceremoniously clean, or ceremoniously unclean until the end of the evening. That, I don't know why. So I'm thinking if a guy masturbates, he ejaculates, right? Why is he unclean for the remainder of the day? Like, I don't know. But, and here's my point is, I think humans can still get value out of the Old Testament because rules that come up that you can't really understand why you wouldn't do that, there may still be hidden danger lying in it, because you need to, like, the way that the original people who Moses bestowed this knowledge upon, right? Imagine them. All these rules would have been just like verse 16. Right now, I read verse 16. I have no clue why that matters. But back then, I almost guarantee most of these rules that people are like, why shouldn't I do that? Why shouldn't I do this? Why shouldn't I do this? Right? And I mean, there's rules like don't have sex with animals, right? Don't let animals have sex with you. Don't, like, just so many of these things probably did happen, and God says that, and he does say in here that it was happening, like the land that eventually is becoming Israel, where God is delivering the people, the native inhabitants already practice all these things, right? They sleep with each other's wives, they have sex with animals, they do all this different stuff. So I don't know, just that perspective totally shifted the way that I view the Old Testament. And I just wanted to share that. This video is mainly for me to share that because I was struggling with it, and I felt like once again I turned to YouTube, I shared my genuine feelings, my uncertainty, and God delivered an answer to me and really helped me see things more clearly. So anyways, I hope this helps somebody else out there. Matt, thank you again. Love you, brother. Love the rest of you, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Take care.